Welcome to Running for Real, a global community with a shared love and curiosity for running. Together we reconnect with the reasons why we love to run and discover ways it helps us become better people. Whether it's the quiet moments of a morning run while the rest of the world still sleeps, or befriending the strangers next to you at the start line of a race, we are here to connect with others who see running as the common thread that weaves our lives together. Come join me, Tina Muir, as I talk with people from all walks of life, united by a love of running. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 304 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited that you are here and excited that we got this opportunity today to talk to the CEO of Allbirds, Tim Brown. Tim is someone who doesn't tend to do many podcasts, especially running podcasts, as he is busy running a public company. And he is also one of the co-founders. And you're going to hear a little bit about that story today. Fascinating one. And before that, he was actually a professional soccer, or as we say, him and I say, football player. And he got to travel all over the world getting to do that. Now, Tim and I, you may have heard me mention about us running together at the Tree Flyer event a few weeks ago or a few months ago in New York. And this was when I said to him, I really would love to interview you, get to know you more. He said some things that I wanted to dig into a little bit more at this point. You know I like to do that. So I set it up and here we are. I hope you enjoy this episode with the co-founder and CEO of Allbirds, Tim Brown. Legacy of Speed follows the transformation of a San Jose State track program in the 1960s. What started out as a second-tier state college no one outside of California had ever heard of, quickly became known as the home to Speed City. The guidance of one coach and his unconventional techniques launched the careers of the fastest sprinters of the day. Host Malcolm Gladwell, a competitive runner himself and former podcast guest on here, traces the journeys of those sprinters who went on to ignite a boycott movement and protest the 1968 Summer Olympics. Malcolm talks to Olympic athletes, sports journalists, performance coaches, and documentarians. And you'll hear from some of the best runners of all time, Tommy Smith, John Carlos, and Lee Evans. It's a story about athletes who dared to take a stand and the mentors who made them fast enough and brave enough to change the world. Find Legacy of Speed wherever you get your podcasts. Tim, welcome to the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm happy to have you on here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, so we were together about a month ago. My version of that story was you were trying to race me around a half-mile block of New York City where we were playing some version of Frogger where hazards were coming at us from every direction. You know, even the textbook boxes falling off a loading truck as we came up to them. And is the word Frogger? That's like crossing a road, so that might not even be the right word. But I would love to hear your version of that story.
Well, foolishly, yeah, maybe I thought that for 30 seconds. And I quickly deleted the thought and just tried to hang on. But it was great to spend some time, and we were obviously there launching a big new performance shoe with Allbirds, and you've been helping us out with our All Good Collective, our community program, which we really appreciate. So it was great to spend some time, albeit that I'm grateful you did most of the talking on that run because I was about it.
I don't know about that. I think you were definitely holding your own. But you said about a shoe there, the Tree Flyer, the Flyer. For someone who doesn't know what that is, you know, what was that press event for?
Yeah, it was a big moment for Allbirds. We're sort of 6 years in. For those of you that haven't heard of us, we're a brand born in New Zealand, founded in San Francisco in 2016, focused on deep, sustainable material innovation, lifestyle and performance footwear, and some apparel, and trying to shift a category to think differently about the way that it makes things. And the Tree Flyer was our third performance footwear franchise, and we launched it in New York, and it's off to a great start, and we're really, really excited, and it's got a whole bunch of tech and innovation wrapped up in it, which you know about because you very kindly helped test it for us.
Yes, yep. And it's funny you said, for anyone who does not know, anyone who listens to this who does not know, I would be very surprised if they didn't know what I am definitely raving about Allbirds any possible opportunity. And yes, did run 2 marathons, a half, a 10K and a 5K in the Flyers. So I've definitely tested them out in a very aggressive way for a new pair of shoes I was putting on my feet, but I love them, as that was clear, and I'll put links for everyone in the show notes. Now, I want to dig in to your story a little bit first. You were born in the UK, but you grew up in New Zealand. So you also mentioned there that, how did you phrase it? You said it was founded in San Francisco, but did you say born in New Zealand? You used another word. Yeah, why do you say it like that?
Well, maybe not too dissimilar from my life story. Where it was born and where it grew up are two different things. So I was born in the UK. My father's English, my mum's a Kiwi, but grew up from a very young age as a New Zealander, a very deeply proud Kiwi for anyone who knows me, and came over to America on a soccer scholarship. Ended up having about a decade-long career in professional sport. And then along the way, Allbirds was born as a curiosity project on the side of the sporting career. And when I ended up retiring from sport after a very special journey that took me to the World Cup in 2010, I started to really focus on this project and ended up launching it in San Francisco, where we're now still based with my co-founder Joey. So that's a very, very short, quick run through of everything, and very sort of fortunate, exciting moment for us as a business and for me as a founder in my first job post-sport.
Yeah, that was a very succinct definition of it, and story. I'm very impressed with that because that's not in my skill set to be able to sum things up. But I would love to talk then about obviously being a football, aka for American listeners, soccer player. You obviously running was a part of your training. What was your opinion of it throughout the years? You know, you obviously must have shown some talent as a child playing soccer. Did you enjoy running? Was it the punishment side of things? How has your relationship with running been throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was always a means to an end. It was something that I did so that I could play football to the best of my abilities. In the position I played, I needed to be fit, and I didn't have speed or maybe a lot of technical ability. So my fitness was a core part of how I played the game and tried to contribute, and also was able to forge a place in the professional game. So the running was something that I did, and as it became a professional journey, then it became part of my job. And what was really interesting to me is when I retired, I didn't miss so much the game itself, but I did miss the friendships, and I did miss the fitness and the feeling of being fit. And so developed a kind of a mid-year refresh with my relationship with running and why I was doing it and how often I was doing it. And it's really sort of shifted for me in a really, really special way. And I think I've developed a new and deep love for running, and it's a very, very important part of my life now.
Yeah, that's really cool. Digging into your professional soccer career just a little bit more before we go on further, that sounds like a dream for many around the world. It sounds very glamorous. I would love for you to give us a bit of insight into is it what it seems being a professional football player?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, like anything else, there's good things and bad things. I mean, I think for me, I left New Zealand when I was 18, took up a soccer scholarship in large part due to a big push from my auntie, and ended up having this incredible experience where I was able to combine a deep love for design and my study of it, which I just started doing at university in Wellington, and I was able to port that over to America and the University of Cincinnati and this incredible design school, and then combine it with sport. And it was incredible. The ability to operate, really, really immerse myself in the education, but also the sport, and the combination of those two things fueling each other was really, really special. I don't think there's anything like it really in the world, that system. And it's such a special thing for so many different people and in so many different sports. And I was able to, on the back end of that, come out with a degree in design that I knew was going to be part of my life. Like, I was absolutely head over heels in love with the subject that I discovered. I mean, I think a lot of people have that experience. It happens at different times. I was really fortunate to have it very, very early on with some incredible professors that I got really, really close to, and it just sort of opened up a whole world of possibility for me. And I knew that I'd be working on, in some shape or form, in this way, with these tools, with this education for the rest of my life. And then alongside it, was this opportunity to follow my sporting career a little bit further. I had started to make some age grade New Zealand sides. I ended up not getting drafted in MLS, went and spent some time at an MLS team and got promptly booted out unceremoniously, which was not nice. Went down and played for one of their feeder teams in the USL, which is sort of the next tier down in American football, and had some great fun, but I wouldn't say really thinking about this as a long-term viable career pathway, and made some sort of short-term promises to myself that I was going to kind of get into a top professional league or stop it. And around the same time, there was a New Zealand coach came in who started to paint this vision for a young group of players, of which I was one at the time. There was this incredible pathway and potential for New Zealand to go to a World Cup in 2010, and we hadn't been for 28 years, only once before in 1982. So this vision was laid out before us, and it started to really shift things for me. And it was a really powerful moment where I started to double down, refocus, and commit to the idea that if I wanted to be a part of that, and I really, really did, then I needed to find a professional gig, and found that in Australia eventually after a bunch of false starts and some pretty low moments, calling family from phone boxes in rainy Wales and different places as I tried to make it work in Europe, and then came back and found my home in actually a club in the Australian A-League. And that was the beginning, I think, of about 7 years, maybe a little bit more, of playing in that league. And then, obviously putting myself in a position to be part of that New Zealand team. So it was a really, really special thing, but it was not all easy and not all roses and full of setback and disappointment. But I stuck with it, and I'm really proud of that period.
I want to dig in a little bit to what you said early on in that, in terms of, you said about, firstly, I didn't know you went to the University of Cincinnati. I lived in Lexington, Kentucky for 5 years, so that was only an hour away from Cincinnati. You said about finding what you love, knowing, like, being head over heels in the design element of things, yet you also had this professional career. Now, as someone who also did the same thing, came to the US on scholarship, I was absolutely taken aback by the intensity of college athletics, and it made it almost quite difficult to enjoy my studies or academics, because it felt so, like, for me, running was the priority, even though technically it wasn't supposed to be. Did you struggle with that element of it, that you kind of felt pulled in two directions while you were in college, or do you feel you were able to navigate that well?
No, actually quite the opposite. I really struggled when I was, as a professional, focused just on the sport. Like the combination of the two, was really the ultimate for me. And I felt like, left to my own devices, you start to sort of dwell on the results and performance. And there wasn't time in university, and there was always the sense of, okay, you're playing the sport, but here's this other thing going on that's about the world. And so, while you might have played really well in a game on Saturday or lost the game on Sunday, you were still a student like everyone else on Monday with the same expectations. And there was an ability to kind of have a little bit of a goldfish mindset, where those things were gone very, very quickly, and you just didn't have the time. And so, also the ability, time to be intellectually fulfilled. There's a grind to professional sport, and you're traveling and you're on the road. And there was a gap when, when I wasn't doing that in the same way. So for me, it was really the opposite. And I took the sport super seriously. Don't get me wrong, but I actually found the distractions of thinking about other stuff was something I actually had to build into my professional sporting life. And really, in some ways, Allbirds was born from, keeping myself busy and not dwelling and thinking too much about the game you were playing.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that, the initial early days of this being like a side hustle before you retired from football. What were some of the early, was it about shoes from the beginning, or what were some of the early ideas you had? I recently watched the TV show We Crashed, and I don't know if you've seen that or not, but it's about obviously WeWork. And he had some ideas like, I think it was like baby clothes and really random things that were nothing to do with what he ended up doing. But do you have any funny stories of something you came up with in those early moments, or was it always about shoes?
I mean, well, I think the first point is like one of the cool things about professional sport is you get loads of free gear, maybe the best thing. And so I was sponsored by one of the big sportswear companies that shall not be named, and used to get lots of free gear. And the inspiration in many ways for the founding of Allbirds was born from that experience and the observation that the majority of that gear was heavily logoed and predominantly synthetic. And I started to get really intrigued and interested by the idea that you might be able to do it differently. And it very, very quickly lays it on to the idea of footwear and natural materials and the good fortune cue, lots of sheep jokes. There's lots of sheep in New Zealand. The wool industry has been this sort of legacy, historical category that's been in a significant decline year after year since the early 80s. And actually applied for and won on the back of reading a magazine one day after training for a wool innovation grant. And there was a funding body that accepted that. I put a little bit of money in and developed a fiber for use in footwear. And that was really the beginning. And so I followed my nose for a number of years, visited factories in my off season, and just started to imagine, dream a little bit and see the possibility and the idea of making a product in a slightly different way. So that was the beginning. And, I ended up making some shoes, trying to build a brand that I ended up kind of revisiting and renaming as Allbirds, and sold them to some of my teammates who largely made fun of me quite ruthlessly. I always figured if you could somehow get them to pay for a category of product that they largely got for free, then you were onto a winner. So they were in many ways like they were the test audience for a lot of that initial work, and just kept with it. And it was probably, I started working on that circa 2008. Give you a sense of the timing, research grants, wool material. Had my last professional. I went to the World Cup in 2010, retired in 2012, and went off to business school to really to see if I could take that idea a little bit further. And so that's when I started to get quite serious about it. So this was over a number of years. I think it's like anything else, right? You stick with something for long enough, and eventually you're half a chance. And so this didn't happen overnight. It was a long, long period of time, and followed all the way through. We launched Allbirds on the 1st of March, 2016. So in some ways I look back like a little bit of a crazy person. It really was a sort of a 8, 9, 10 year overnight success.
Yeah. You said, it's funny you said about your teammates, because I quite often get the question of, if you were going to go to a running store and you were going to buy a pair of shoes, and I'm always like, honestly, when I was running professionally, I never bought a pair of shoes, so I can't answer that question, because it's as you said, you get it for free, which is one of the perks. But I am impressed that you managed to sell that to your teammates, because I know what a sell that would have been. So it's fun to hear that. And when you went off to get your MBA, you already had the vision in your mind of it. Was it about sustainability even then because of the wool? Or talk to us a little bit about how clear you were when you went in to do your MBA.
Well, I went back to England. I wanted to go back there. I also didn't want to be the last person at the party. So after the World Cup, I realized that I'd taken this way further than I ever thought possible, and so it was the right time to kind of leave. And I also there was a particular school in London. My father and my grandfather worked right near it, London School of Economics. I hadn't gone to it, but it was sort of a thing in their life. So there was a bunch of things there that kind of came together, and I went back there and really went back to study all the subjects at school that I'd avoided, and so much so that they sent me a letter and like called me in early just for sort of like literally remedial work because I had so many gaps. But I was very fortunate to get in there and had this incredible experience. And I don't think that, that the business was front and center, but it started to be, and I started to realize, hey, there's all this entrepreneurial opportunity, and oh gosh, I've been working on this thing for so long. And I never wrote a business plan, and I never thought about supply chains or margin or any of the functional structural parts of the business, and what an opportunity to start to run that through. And actually came over to Kellogg, to Northwestern. They have an exchange program with LSE, and I spent a semester there and took an entrepreneurship class with a professor called Carter Cast, who is just this amazing character who used to run Walmart.com. Just another moment in time, Tina, where the right idea hits the right moment, hits the right class. And I ran, this business idea through that class, and it was just incredible. It was sort of 10 weeks where I really connected all the dots and decided, hey, there's real potential. And at the end of that class, Carter called me into his office and he said, look, I think this is a really, really, really shit idea. But for whatever reason, you seem really committed. And so why don't you put it on Kickstarter or something so it can fail and you can get on with your life? Because I'm worried otherwise you're going to chase this thing,
What was the pitch at that point? What was, if you could sum that up in a sentence, what was this idea that they
it was a wool running shoe.
A wool running shoe. Okay.
Yeah. And we'd gone through hundreds of prototypes and samples, and we had the material and found factories, and he was just like, look, it's just too hard to do this. Making shoes is too hard. You're making materials is too hard. But it came from a place of love, and the Kickstarter campaign became like a catalyst to sort of take this idea from something conceptual and make it tangible and actually see if someone was going to buy it. And so that's what I did. I caught his bluff, and I went home to New Zealand and shot a video for $700 on a family friend's sheep farm in Pahatanui, just north of Wellington, with the help of my brother, and put this thing on Kickstarter in, I think, March of 2014. And my girlfriend, now wife at the time, out of sympathy, sent it out to all her friends, one of whom was Joey, who's now my co-founder and was an early customer and critic of the idea. And he was the one that really sort of helped bring the third plank of this around our sustainability purpose. But that was really the beginning. And it was, I think I've subsequently understood, a lot of people talk about ideas, and not to say that that's trivial or not without, praise. It's just, it's another thing to actually take it and make something and put it out in the world with a really good chance that you're going to get a lot of negative feedback. And so that was a critical stepping stone.
Thank you to InsideTracker for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I've been talking about InsideTracker for many years now because I use it often. I love getting my check-ins. I am coming up on 15 times I've had it tested, even though, as I've mentioned before, I really hate needles. Yeah, it is worth it to go get it done, to check what's going on the inside. And InsideTracker was founded by leading scientists in aging, genetics, and biometric data. They give you this ultra-personalized performance platform that is like no other. They use a patented algorithm to analyze your body's data and provide you with a clear picture of what's going on the inside. Often we feel like something is up, we feel like we are a little off, and we can't quite put our finger on what it is. How could we? InsideTracker is going to allow you to see what that is, offer you a science-backed recommendation for positive diet and lifestyle changes to get that area, whatever it is, whatever it finds, optimized and under control. And then they'll give you a concrete action plan and track your progress towards reaching your goals each and every day, every step of the way. Now, my friends, you as a Running for Real listener can get 25% off everything at InsideTracker. And you can go to insidetracker.com/Tina. They will give you the paperwork to go get yourself tested at any Quest facility, and they are all over the US. You'll fill out a bit of personal information. They'll give you that analysis and recommendations. You'll be able to take steps to make the changes customized based on your lifestyle, and then track your progress. It is as simple as that. I love using it. I know you will too. Go to InsideTracker.com/Tina. So what would be your advice for someone who, would you say at that point you said that your professor was very against this, was probably not going to work, wool running shoe doesn't make any sense. Did you believe in it that fiercely in your heart that you were prepared to do whatever it took? Or do you think it was that competitiveness from being a football player who was now trying to figure out what to do with his life in terms of identity, that almost like a stubbornness? Was it the idea, or was it not wanting to fail?
It was very much the latter. Yeah. And I'd had the benefit now of a little bit of pattern recognition to look back on this. And similarly with sport, there was a lot of people that told me that I couldn't do it and shouldn't do it and maybe wouldn't do it. And that was a real drive to go and prove people wrong. And that gets you so far, right? Like I think that was really something that drove me to get an opportunity, to play professionally in the A-League in Australia. But then you're actually doing it and you're living it, and you want to excel at it at the sort of the next level of achievement. And I think that's where, for me, I had to unlock the idea of playing for my country and the larger sense of purpose that really opened the door for me to do whatever it took to achieve that goal, because I knew how much it could and would mean to my family and to my friends. It was a sort of idea, the idea of going to a World Cup there was transcended the sport, was sort of something that I knew could be incredibly impactful, and to be a part of that would be amazingly special. And that opened doors to LSE and the whole next chapter. And then I found myself making shoes, determined to prove people wrong, but realizing that I hadn't grown up on a sheep farm, as good as that would have been for the story, and didn't, shoes and the vision for creating shoes wasn't really a huge driver for me, albeit it was something I was really interested in. And so this idea of Joey coming along and the purpose around sustainability was a sort of a similar unlock. We were like, oh, hang on a minute, there is this problem of our generation in climate change. Sure. Joey had this vision much clearer than I did around the fact that we were going to need to fundamentally rethink the way that we made the products and services that we use every day. The fashion industry was give or take 10% of global emissions and was probably going to be on the forefront of that change. And moreover, when you think about massive shifts in society and the way that we do things, usually it's the artists, the creators, the storytellers, and the fashion industry that leads that. And he'd come out of a biotech startup that had been trying to be a part of this revolution, and it had made some real progress, but ultimately fallen down. And so the opportunity to kind of do it again with storytelling and culture combined with the science was a meeting of the minds. Our wives had obviously been roommates in college, and so we came together, and that was a huge unlock for me. Not to say that it got easier at that point, Tina, but there was a sense of sort of the larger why and the larger reason why you were doing something. And it's been critical in both those chapters of my life for me to really have a clarity on that, because I don't think it's sustainable to just keep proving people wrong for forever. It has to be something more, or at least it has been for me.
Absolutely. And everything you're saying there is so interesting to me as someone who also did a very similar thing. And I've often wondered that over the last 5 years while I stepped away from professional running, am I just channeling all that, all the drive to succeed, the need to be recognized, all that stuff into something else? Am I actually working through it, or am I actually just driving it on? So I love hearing that Joey was the person that helped you to see beyond that, to take this beyond just I'm going to do this to prove you wrong, and into wow, we can make this something special. Before we go into that further, I actually want to just ask one question though quickly that really piqued my interest. When you said about the World Cup though, you said about doing that for others. You would say that felt like that was, because for me, the running in the World Championships was, I didn't feel like I was good enough until I had that GB vest in my hands, but you would say for you, you'd gone past that at that point, and it was about doing it for those who had supported you.
I think they're two different things. Yeah, I think I think they're the same. Like in my mind, playing for my country and the depth of emotion that gave to me and the feelings that it gave to me, and also, to my broader family. And then the idea of going to a World Cup and what that might do maybe for the game in terms of, all these kind of concepts that are a bit funny to talk about legacy and the fact it hadn't taken 28 years and to be part of that and be part of a team that did that with, at that stage, a group of people that have become really, really close friends, and to be able to point that team towards a goal that, that might stand the test of time. It's a pretty rare opportunity. Very few people have done that. And so I think it's a combination of all of those things. But the larger point being that it stood for something more than just sort of winning or losing a game. Of course, that's what you needed to do to achieve the outcome. But the idea that people still talk about being at that game in New Zealand when we qualified, and I'd like to think there's a whole bunch of good that came out of it, continues to come out of it in terms of and to have been a part of that was pretty special. So it was a higher order kind of outcome beyond just the result, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you for explaining that. I had to, as someone who I drove for 14 years to get my goal, and then once I got it, it was kind of very empty feeling of like, okay, what now? So I just had to ask, and I love that you had, as you said, more meaning behind that, and what was it gonna mean for New Zealand as a country, having been so long since they were last there. So it's good that you had that beyond that, but also you can say that part of it was for yourself too.
That being said, since you asked, I remember at the end when I retired and I was going off to the UK, and my mum sort of pulled me aside and said to me, it was a pretty emotional sort of moment, and said, "Hey, we're so proud of you, but we're really excited to have you back."
Yes.
And so I think it's all about choices and focus and achievement and trade-offs, and I was in that sort of zone of achievement, which I'm sure you can identify with, and it was really nice to be in it, and then quite nice to be out of it as well. And so it's like anything else. I think there's lessons learned from that too, and even in an entrepreneurial journey, I find myself now in maybe even more competitive, more challenging, at times more pressurized environment than even professional sport in different ways. And I think I've learned a lot of lessons about being a little kinder to myself along the way, enjoying it a little bit more along the way. And my wife in particular, I think, has taught me that if there's a sort of a metaphorical bottle of champagne to open, don't keep waiting on that, because you'll never ever open it. There'll always be another thing. Open it on a Monday when you want to, because the little celebrations and the little wins are really, really important. And I think I'm doing a much, much better job second time around than I did the first time. And so I think that's, like anything else, there's lots of reflections there in terms of the process of achievement and what it takes, and how you approach that.
So interesting you brought that up, because that was something I was planning on bringing up later, to say, as a competitive person, as someone who's been at the top, you want Allbirds to be the best, to be the best it can be, to just, of course you're going to want to make it what it can be, but how do you have a family now, you're a father, you're obviously a husband, you have your business. How do you prioritize? I would imagine every email that comes through can feel like, you probably, as I think we talked about, you have about 7,000 emails a day, but everything that comes through that you need to respond to probably feels pretty important to the future of Allbirds when it comes in. How do you say sometimes, you know what, I'm with my family, that can wait, even if it's a lost opportunity of some kind?
Sure, yeah. It's a curious thing about success, right? You have some of it, and then your reward is things get harder. So, it's all about guardrails and prioritizing what's important. And, I think going into this, there's never been any sort of sense that my family wasn't at the top of that list. And so, you get the opportunity as an entrepreneur and a business builder to hold the pen. There's a lot of things that you don't control and a lot of things that are really hard, but Joey and I talk a lot about the idea that you get to choose who you work with, and you get to choose how you work. And And so I think just being really clear about that and putting really clear guardrails around it has been helpful. And we've followed that discipline from the beginning. Look, there's always another email to send. There's always another person to respond to. But the question is more, okay, where do you want to go and what does success look like? And being really clear on that. Oftentimes you understand that saying no is sometimes a lot more powerful than saying yes. And if we've had success so far with Allbirds, it's been in large part due to extraordinary focus and saying no to the 99% of the opportunities so that we can focus on the 1% that are really going to make the difference. And I think that's a learned skill, but it's also a discipline, and it also helps to create space. And as an athlete, Tina, too, that the rest is just as important as the training. So all of these things sort of ladder up to the idea that you can have both. You just got to be really, really clear about it. And it doesn't mean that sometimes there won't be periods of really extreme work and some trade-offs at times, but who doesn't deal with that? I think, in the fullness of time, if you're disciplined and you're really clear on your priorities, the world will kind of work around that. And you also have some areas where you just won't go, some things you just will not do. And so I think getting really clear about that is important, and going so far as to write those down. And some of the stuff that we did in the early days of Allbirds was really powerful around our mission, defining our values, and we wrote a 10-year vision in the future. This idea of visioning and storytelling and really articulating these things, not leaving any of them to chance, being quite intentional and planful about this can really help. Because once it starts, and lo and behold, you have a little bit of success, you're going to get pulled in 1,000 directions. So you need to have kind of a really grounded and clear sense of what you're trying to achieve. And again, I've had the good fortune of having gone through this once with sport, and there's a lot of similarities in the two journeys and making a ton of mistakes. So I think this time around I'm much, much clearer, and I'm better for the fact that I've had that experience before.
Thank you to Allbirds for being a partner with Running for Real. Now, you have heard Tim and I talk a little bit about the tree flyers today. I also have mentioned that I ran Boston, I ran Maui within a week of each other, 2 marathons. I've done a half, a 5K, a 10K in these shoes, and recently just did my first ultra marathon, 33 miles in my tree flyers. These are fantastic shoes. In case it wasn't obvious, I love them. You are hearing how genuine of a guy Tim is. You can go check out allbirds.com to go get yourself a pair of those tree flyers, to look at all the other amazing stuff they have on the website. And you will sure to find some other interesting things on there. There's a lot on the website that talks about exactly what Tim is talking about here, how they're just doing things better, just thinking about our planet and just the future of our world. And I hope you go check it out. Look at allbirds.com. That's good to hear. And it reminded me of the fact that it really struck me when we were standing in the store in New York. I think it was right when I met you that first time. You said you had 2 young boys. Is that right? 2 kids?
Girl and a boy.
A girl and a boy. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we were standing there, and my children were running around like crazy in the store, just messing around. Jad has kids, Ramesh has young kids, and it really struck me of wow, not only do I feel comfortable with the fact that my, at the time, 1-year-old and 4-year-old I'm not feeling like I'm embarrassed to have them here, or I need them to be removed, or that I felt totally comfortable with them. But it was really refreshing for me to think we've got the director of innovation, the director of materials, is that correct? And then you as the CEO, all standing there with young kids, and not there, but as a priority, and still able to be successful and do something meaningful. That was really a powerful moment that I was very aware of in the moment it was happening. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I take it as a big compliment, and if I go back in time, pre-kids, maybe I wouldn't have quite understood that as clearly. I think obviously it changes a lot when you're a parent, and at the end of the day, I'm pretty clear about what comes first for me. And it doesn't mean that you can't do all things, and it doesn't mean that you can't, have your cake and you eat it too. And, I believe Allbirds can be an extraordinarily impactful 100-year brand that shifts the category. And I probably believe that now more than ever. And equally, some of those other things I won't compromise, and both of those things can be true. I think sometimes it's funny, there's the assumption that work is bad and life is good, and increasingly those lines are blurred, and sometimes it's the other way around. There's there's a lot of fluidity in the way that we work now more than ever, and so I think now more than ever it's probably incumbent on people to be really clear about their priorities and how they manage their time and how they approach those types of things, so it doesn't just happen to them.
Yeah, thank you. One more thing I want to go into related to that before we go to, you said about the 100-year business. That really fascinated me when you talked about that. Did you struggle at all with, for you, exercise now? And I'm very much in the same position, although maybe I push a little bit more towards finding time to exercise because I'm not quite in the situation you are. But coming from a situation, as you mentioned, where your family said they got their Tim back, and my family said a very similar thing. We got our Tina back. Did you find it difficult to go from your exercise, your sport was the dictating factor in a lot of situations? I'm assuming with your family, at least for me, it was, I need to go eat this food before the day before. So my whole family would have to go when I was visiting or whatever it was. To now, you have young kids, you have a business, and your exercise is squeezed in. Or if a kid is sick, oh, well, I can't do it. Did you struggle with that at all?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's something about, struggled in the sense that when you're doing it, and particularly when you're doing sport at a high level, you miss weddings and you miss family holidays and you're traveling all the time. And I didn't have a family at that stage, and at least my own. And so there's a whole bunch of trade-offs there. You got to eat certain things, and you can't go out and hang out with your friends in the same way. So it becomes this little weird little bubble that you're in. And there's aspects of that are great, and I made great friendships. And there's other parts of it you're like, oh gosh, I want to kind of go out and see the world. And I've traveled to all these places and I've seen none of them, And so some of that stuff is, there's trade-offs, right? But in terms of missing it, no. I mean, I feel like I had this incredible run, took it as far as further than I ever dreamed I could in terms of my sporting career, had a great run, exit stage left, and then went and started something else. And it was, I think it was the thing that was difficult for me in that period was just sort of, okay, what am I going to do next? And this shoe thing is that can we make this work? And I can't find a job, and I'm spending all my savings, and what's kind of all of a sudden I find myself 10, 15 years behind all my folks of my age because they've been building their careers really methodically, and I've been kicking a ball around it. And so some of that stuff was difficult, but and more, that's where running and exercise has just been something that is a really, really important piece of my routine. It is the thing that allows me to clear my head, to not get stuck in any sort of thought pattern, or worry about things overly. And I'll go for a run, I'll feel better, and it'll clear my mind. And I do that without my phone. It's usually when no one can get in touch with me. And so it has become a really important sort of almost spiritual exercise for me, and try and do it every other day. So it's nothing more than that. It's usually not more than 30 minutes or half an hour. I don't time myself. I don't measure myself. I usually run from the house pretty quickly, and I'm out the door because there's a narrow window of time between other things, but it's my little bit of time for myself. And it's important. And when I don't do it, I miss it.
Do you feel that is your way, even though you said you mentioned to me we were running together, and also just mentioned that you run pretty hard. Do you find time to relax or slow yourself down? Or is that essentially the time, even though you're physically pushing your body?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pushing piece is just because that's the bit that gives you the endorphins or whatever the technical term is, what kind of clears your mind and you get a sweat out of it, versus kind of just running along, talking on your cell phone. So I make that distinction. I'm certainly not trying to achieve any sort of time or run a marathon or anything like that. So, but I'll tend to do short, quick bursts with higher intensity. So I think that's one part of it. But then, I'll try and do something every other day, and I'll run a couple of times a week, maybe 3 times a week, and then I'll go to the gym or I'll do yoga, and I tend to mix it up on a pretty regular basis, depending on what's available, where I am, and what's going on. And again, the time away from technology, the time for myself, it's not a huge commitment of time, but it's important for me, and a buffer between kind of work and family, and it's important. And I'll squeeze it in on the weekend during nap time, or whenever there is the opportunity. So I'm not maniacal about exactly when I do it, but finding those little windows and being really fluid with how I think about it is sort of is fitted for me.
Yeah. And you find that helps with like mental health in terms of your life is very fast paced, I would imagine. You've got your time with your kids, which, life is dictated by what they want at that time. And then the exercise is your little bit for yourself.
That's exactly right. Yeah. A little bit of buffer. And I find that if I'm worried about something or stuck with something in my mind, if I go for a run, whatever I was worried about, I tend to have almost forgotten it when I come back. And that's just a gift, and it's my own personal thing. And it's nothing more than that, really. But it's just it's a part of my routine. But I'll achieve it in a whole bunch of different ways. And if I can't do it for a couple of days, and then I'll go back to back. So it's all very, very, very fluid and informal. But there's a sort of an underlying kind of cadence and discipline to it that for me brings me a lot of like joy, and I take a lot of energy from it.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask, I mentioned about the building a 100-year business. I heard you say that at the Flyer event, and you mentioned it earlier in this interview. How does someone go about a 100-year business, or thinking that far in the future? And what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's about a few things, really. I think it's about the courage, and I use the word courage intentionally because, it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to kind of craft a vision and a story, and with real intention around a business that you might have the audacity to think that in 100 years it might still be around, might have outlived you and the people working on it, and still have meaning and impact. Like, that's, when you think about it, is a pretty audacious way to think. And if that was to be true, then the way that you might be building things in the short term would need to be extraordinarily intentional and thoughtful and meaningful. And the problems that you were going after as a business on behalf of your community and the consumers that engage with you would need to be necessarily really difficult and longitudinal. And I think in the case of Allbirds, all those conditions are true. That doesn't mean they were there from day one, but they've come to be shaped in a vision, I think, that makes it feel like the opportunity we have is that big, and the time horizon of the challenge that we're tackling is that long, and some of the work that we're doing, I think we have the audacity to believe could have that type of impact. And so, again, which is not to say that all of that is true right now, and we're 6 years into that journey, and we've got a lot of work to do, but there's an incredible amount of opportunity ahead too. So, like anything else, it's part inspiration, part challenge, and part opportunity in the way that we're looking at it now. And it's I think it forces you to be, one of our values is intentionality, to be very, very thoughtful about the choices that you make, not all of them, but the ones that matter, so that, these things in the fullness of time can live their potential.
Yeah. And let's wrap up here by talking about, you have been very clear about, and Allbirds as a whole has been clear about wanting to change the performance industry. That was something that you and I also talked about at the Flyer event in front of the audience, in terms of bringing together sustainability and performance, that the two can be as one. Whereas when I spoke, I said about how, for me as a professional athlete, I couldn't even imagine how those two could work in harmony together. So what have you seen within the performance or the running space that gives you hope that maybe Allbirds is starting to have an impact?
Well, I mean, stepping beyond Allbirds for a second, I think for 50 years, give or take, we've been innovating in synthetic materials derived from plastic and barrels of oil. And there's an opportunity to do it differently, that natural materials, if we give that the same level of focus, same level of an innovation investment, can create as good, if not better, experiences for the consumer, for the athlete, for the everyday person, while also having less environmental impact. And there's a huge opportunity there to kind of walk back in time to find the future of where we need to go and how we need to rethink the way that we make products, shoes, T-shirts, with less environmental impact. People don't buy sustainable products, they buy great products. But for increasingly, everyone is of the understanding that for a product to be truly great, it must also be sustainable. And that's going to take new ways of working, new ways of sharing, transparency. We have a deep focus on carbon, new business models, a rethink of the systems and supply chains that are behind the way that we make products. So there's a lot to it, and I just think that Allbirds has been founded with that vision in mind, and there's a huge purposeful opportunity around the environment, but there's also an enormous business opportunity that consumers are starting to demand more. They want products to be made differently with greater empathy for the environment, and we like to think we're working very, very hard to be leading that conversation. And we've come a long way in 6 years. We've got a long way to go, but there's some exciting, really, really exciting stuff that we're doing in both lifestyle and performance and footwear and apparel. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, you were saying about have to be a great product as well. I had meant to mention this earlier, but for listeners, in 2016, in case you don't know, Time magazine called Allbirds the world's most comfortable shoes. It's definitely what comfortable is one of the words associated with Allbirds, and so that's obviously another huge part of this. Is that not only have you made these sustainable shoes, but once someone buys a pair, they live in them. They're often a repeat customer. You would be hard pressed to find a day where I'm not wearing my shoes. So I just want to highlight that point for everyone. I will put lots of links in the show notes for people to go check that out. But is there anything you'd like to just tell any listeners who maybe have a dream about starting their own business, or even just in sticking to something that is meaningful to them?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, well, firstly, thank you so much for having us. It's been great to chat with you. I think there's a bunch of lessons along the way, and I think critical to all of this, to improvement, is the act of seeking feedback. And I think about my old teammates, when I think about all the different people, even when I think about you and the flyer, and it's been like such a muscle and something that I think we pride ourselves at Allbirds in. And I think personally, I've always been proactively sought to get better. There's something I think in the athlete's mindset where that's just part of the journey of seeking coaching to improve. But there's another side of it. I think particularly in the case of entrepreneurship, and maybe something I wish I'd thought about a little bit more in the context of sport, is ignoring feedback too, and trusting your instinct, and doing something because you damn well want to do it, and doing it in a pure way, even if it's counterintuitive. I think I've learned in the fullness of time that if everyone thinks your idea is a good one, it's almost certainly not. That the interesting businesses are born counterintuitively in the cracks in the pavement from the ideas that others have overlooked for various reasons, including quite often that they know too much. And so that ability to listen and seek feedback, but also to be very, very selective with what you on board. Innovation and consensus don't always go together that well. And so I think that would be a big piece of it. And the other one is just to start. I mean, I think, again, the act of actually putting something out in the world so that someone other than your mum can reach into their wallet and take money out and actually pay you for it is the bit that's really hard, but also the bit where you learn. And so the act of sort of starting, I think, is good. And then lastly, in Joey, I think I found a partner who's very different from me in terms of skill sets, and that necessitates a couple of things. One, that you're really, really honest about what you can do and what you can't, and that you're also prepared to go and lean into work with people that are very different from you, both in approach and skill set. And that's been a really, really important part of any success we've had. And so I think as a starting point, to be really, really clear with yourself about where you can add value and where the gaps are is important, and then go find someone to complement them has been an important part of this for me. Some people can do it by myself. I don't, I certainly was not one of them.
Oh, that's such good advice. Thank you so much, Tim, for sharing that with us, for the rest of the interview, for letting us get to know you. Appreciate you and all that you have done. And thank you so much for being here today.
Likewise, Tina. It's so good to chat with you. We'll see you again soon.
Hi, friends. Just a quick message to say a big thank you to the Running for Real team. While I may be the face of Running for Real and the voice behind the podcast, there are a group of people who are working tirelessly to provide everything that runners could need within our community to make our community stronger, better, and evolve and grow and learn from one another. We are working really hard to make Running for Real the place we believe it can be within our community. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone on our team. That is Victoria, Stacey, Sandy, Sally, Maria, Kelsey, Kat, Jeremy, and Erica. I appreciate each and every one of you and the hard work that you put in. Now let's get back to the show. I loved that conversation. Could have kept going for much longer. I wish we had much more time, but that was, I made the most of the time that we had. That was a cool opportunity for me. And I thank you so much for listening in. I hope you will go check out Allbirds if you have not already. Go get yourself a pair of those tree flyers. When I recorded this, I had not done my ultra marathon in my tree flyers. I have now. So that's 33 miles they've done in a row. No changes of socks, no nothing. Oh, and may I mention it was 95 degrees. So they definitely held up well. You can go to allbirds.com to check that out. Also want to thank our other sponsors. Go check out Legacy of Speed wherever you find your podcast. It's that podcast hosted by Malcolm Gladwell. Sounds absolutely fascinating. I am very excited to go check it out and excited that we get to help spread the word. And thank you to InsideTracker. By going to InsideTracker.com/Tina, you can get yourself 20% off. And go check out what's going on the inside. Thank you so much for listening today. I look forward to seeing you on Monday for a Together Run, and I'll see you next Friday for a regular episode.